Hi, welcome to It's Your Smarter Money with Atlas Fiduciary Financial. I'm Dr. Laura and Dr. Steve is with me, and we're going to be talking to you today about the emotions that are happening in the market and how we're trying to work against them. So, a banking crisis, a debt ceiling problem, recessionary fears, turmoil in the global tensions in the all over the world. These are reasons that people are very fearful. Yet, you may have noticed that the US stock market has been acting kind of strange lately. And so we want to talk about that.
Yeah.
First, Steve, do you want to talk a minute about some of the fears that people have when they contact us recently? Some of the things that they're talking about.
Well, there was the debt ceiling and the fear that, and I think the administration has overblown the risk, but that we would default on debt, and it actually did happen in 1979. A lot of people don't realize it. I actually didn't realize it myself. I was too busy as going out fooling around, like Laura said the same thing. But it actually did happen, and it wasn't catastrophic. But with that said, it looks like there is a deal to raise a debt ceiling now. It has to get through Congress. And there's some Republicans, probably some Democrats, that won't vote for it because it kind of violates their principles. But I think it's going to get through both houses, is the impression I have. And the good part about it is there's some reduction in federal spending, because federal spending has been out of control. And that's one of the reasons why we hit the debt ceiling so quickly. We're right now, the total debt of the United States is about 120% of GDP, which is a level I don't think we've ever hit. So there has to be some control on spending. And so we're seeing that. So that's been one issue that's been weighting down the markets. Additionally, there's also inflation, which has come down of late. And there's also the fear that the Federal Reserve would have to keep increasing interest rates. And anytime they raise interest rates, there has to be a repricing of all these various markets, including the stock market. The stock market, when you have a price to earnings ratio of 28, that may make some sense, maybe not totally, when you have an interest rate, when the treasuries were returning almost zero. But now that, in fact, recently we got 1 month treasuries at a rate of 6.5%, by the way. When you have interest rates that high, it doesn't make sense to have a price to earnings ratio of 28 to 30. So there's some repricing there in the markets as well. That could be over. We don't know. Additionally, there's some fear that we may be entering a recession. And there is still some signals that indicate we may be headed toward a recession, some that I've seen. But I don't know that anyone really knows for sure. It's possible that this debt ceiling deal may actually help, because there's also some, I would say, some changes to permitting to make it easier to permit large projects, energy projects in this country as part of that deal. And that actually I believe, will help the economy. So I think there's some aspects of this that will help. And also then, of course, we had the banking crises, which was in part caused by the rise in interest rates. Some banks, they were long on bonds and short on their obligations. And so what happened was they had to liquidate bond holdings to meet depositors' withdrawal requests, and they took large losses. And so, we don't know the extent of how deep that'll go into the banking industry. And that's was part of the uncertainty with respect to the market. So that could all be over. This could all be over. We just don't know.
So, Steve, you've given a really good argument for why some people are feeling extremely fearful.
Yep.
Yet we don't see that in the large cap stock market when we're looking
No.
at the S&P 500. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that particular asset class. We wanted to remind you that when we're looking at your overall portfolio, and this is just a moderate portfolio, Model 5, we know that only a portion of your portfolio, maybe somewhere between 10, 15%, is in large cap stock. So we want to make sure that you understand when we're talking about large cap or the US market, we're only talking about a portion of your investments. You're not fully just invested in the US market. But
right.
Watching what's going on in this US market can be a little bit disconcerting. And so we wanted to talk about that.
Been going a big piece of it's been going sideways much of the year.
Well, it depends what actual benchmark you look at, Steve, because
Yep.
the truth is that these are actually three different benchmarks that are used for large cap stock. One is the S&P 500, which is in the middle. The other is QQQ or NASDAQ, which is more heavily weighted in technology. And then we have our RSP, which is an equally weighted stocks, 2.2% of stocks in the entire holding, whereas in the stock market, the S&P, which is the middle one, that is starting to get much more influenced by technology.
That's
more
right.
specifically, the top 5 stocks which are driving it, which are Tesla, Amazon, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and I forgot the last one.
Amazon
I
or
said
Apple?
one already. Google.
Oh, Google. Yeah, that's correct.
Google.
Yeah, Google. Yeah.
Those 5 stocks make up 25%, a quarter of the overall S&P 500. And so it's heavily weighted towards those stocks. And we wanted to show you specifically what those stocks have done in 2023. Here you can see that they have all risen significantly in 2023, especially NVIDIA last week rose. And, NVIDIA, it really had, Steve was mentioning, had a lot to do with the earning announcement last week. But all of them are being influenced by the increased conversation around AI.
That's right.
All of a sudden, whether it's NVIDIA and even Google, who happen to have platforms to help motivate and enhance and help AI, or if it's just the CEO, for example, of Microsoft, who came out and said, we are going to be leaders in this space. All of these top 5 stocks are driving the S&P 500.
And so NVIDIA is interesting because 7 or 8 years ago, I don't think they recognized as much that this particular product that NVIDIA creates, which are graphics chips, can be used to implement AI. And the reason is because graphics chips can run multiple calculations simultaneously, as opposed to a central processing unit or your microprocessor in your computer. And so they're very, very useful toward AI. And with AI, you need to run multiple calculations simultaneously to implement it. And so this was a discovery about maybe 9 years ago, that NVIDIA just happened to be in the right place at the right time, because they've been making these graphics chips for 30 years, I think. So kind of crazy.
But the key here really is that many analysts are saying that this is potentially a speculative bubble.
Yep.
We are actually creating a very high PE ratio when you take these 5 stocks and you cluster them together in a model, just these 5 stocks. There's a PE ratio of around 122%, which is extremely high. RSP has a ratio of around 12. So they're highly speculative in terms of what they think is going to happen with these 5 stocks.
And so this reminds me of an article I read years ago in the Wall Street Journal, probably in the late 90s, when Cisco had a price to earnings ratio of about 140. And somebody had run an analysis and said to justify that price to earnings ratio and bring it back down to a more normal level, earnings would have to grow about 35% a year for the next 10 years. But at that point, if it really did grow at that point, when you compound those earnings, Cisco would have represented like a third of half of GDP. And so the mathematics doesn't really work well when you have price to earnings ratios that high.
Yeah, and they are forecasting that AI over the next 8 to 10 years is going to grow significantly.
Yep.
But we still have to wait and see who are the companies that are going to be driving that. I don't know if we can assume that it's just these companies that are going to be driving that. Yep. And also what really is going to happen. I think that with any new technology, there's often a lot of bumps in the road, and it's not often a straight line.
Well, a lot of times a disruptor appears,
Absolutely.
I'm going to use his name. Elon Musk appears. He just disrupted the entire launch industry. He disrupted, to some extent, the automotive industry. And they come out of nowhere sometimes, these disruptors, and they could just shoot ahead. And Laura's going to talk about that a little bit more later, I think.
Well, we just wanted to show you what really has happened with these 5 stocks. And we wanted to show you going back to the beginning of 2022. If we look at what happened last year and then where they are now this year, even though they've had significant growth and they've really driven that increase in 2023, most of them still aren't back to even being in positive territory, with the exception really of NVIDIA. And that this all happened last week with the earnings report.
That's up about 15%.
And we also just plugged in there a more steady Eddie type of approach to investing, where we have the RSP, which is that equally weighted portfolio. It still has NVIDIA in it, but it's only 0.2%, and all of these others. And then to further diversify away from just large cap stock, we have the Model 5, which is a very conservative portfolio, where you can see that also has performed better than most of these individual stocks.
Now, one interesting point here for those that are market timers, as you can see, NVIDIA's repricing didn't come out, or didn't actually occur until they mentioned that or reported their earnings up 15%. And so it's obvious nobody really predicted that, because it all shot up in like a day or two. So there you go. If you're a market timer, who could have predicted that, right?
That's right. And this just shows Tesla. While Tesla has increased in 2023 by 56%, let's not forget that it was down last year by 65%. And this shows how difficult it is to get out of that hole. When you're down 65%, you need to grow a lot more than that to get out of the holes. We're still down 45% with Tesla stock.
And by the way, a side note, Elon Musk lost more of net worth than any other person in history because of this, believe it or not, which is amazing.
Yeah, between that and his Twitter deal, huh?
Yeah, he had that too.
So there are a lot of market strategists that are sitting here looking at this situation, and they're saying, well, we've seen this before. We've seen this kind of hype around some kind of technologies before. We saw it back in 2021 with crypto related stocks. We saw it again back in 2000 with the dot-com bubble. And want to remind everybody that in 1999, the dot-com stocks were just soaring. But once the 2000 hit, they plummeted and never really recovered until 2013 for the S&P 500 and 2015 for NASDAQ. And so that was a very long time for us to get back to square one. If you were smart and you just sat there and stayed invested in, for example, in the S&P 500, you probably would have not lost that much money. You would have had 13 years of never regaining anything back, but you would not have lost. Unfortunately, what we saw during that period of time was a lot of people that sold in 2002 when it plummeted down to the bottom, and then again in 2009 when it again reached new lows.
And what this doesn't show is that there are plenty of other asset classes that actually performed quite well over this entire period, including international. At least for the first 5 or 6 years, it performed a lot better than domestic investments.
A diversified portfolio had a nice return, depending upon what kind of model you were in. If you were in a Model 5, I don't have the exact number, but I would say around 6 or 7% return over that period.
Yep. Whereas the S&P basically was flat. Your return was zero from other than maybe possibly dividends. I'm not sure there's a total return or not. This is like level price change, but it was basically flat for about 13 years or 12 or 10 years in that range. So
right. And we were talking about also, so we're talking about crypto related stocks, dot-com stocks, and let's not forget the personal computer market that in the 80s when personal computers came out. Steve and I were talking about The Commodore, which was one of the top personal computers that came out in 1984. By 1994, Commodore was bankrupt and never recuperated.
Right.
And then a lot of the other personal computers that we saw back then, whether it be something like Texas Instruments or Tandy. What did you call Tandy, Steve?
People called it the Trash 80. That was the nickname for it. Not that it was trash. It was just TRS. People just turned it into trash, the name. Also, by the way, IBM had a personal computer division in the 80s. Right. And they sold it off. I think they sold it off to Lenovo years ago. It became Lenovo. A lot of people don't realize that, I think. So
those were the computers that actually started the craze and started the hype, yet they did not actually benefit from the hype. And this is what we see. There is an innovative cycle, a hype cycle that occurs where people get very exuberant about the technology and they invest in it and speculate ahead. And then later on, there is a leveling out, and actually it's almost a curve where people become disillusioned and sell out on it. And that occurs for a while. And then only then, as the technology really stabilizes and there really is demonstration that there's a market for the technology, then you start seeing the growth in the overall stock. We're still very early on in the AI technology, and it's really hard to determine who's going to be the big players 10 years down the road.
And to some extent, what happens is with a lot of technology, it becomes commoditized, which means they can't earn high margins on the products any longer. And we saw that within the computer and the desktop and the laptop industry over the years. They become more like akin to commodities rather than something you sell for 4 times the cost. There's price competition, and that also starts to affect these companies, and that drives the price to earnings ratios down as well. And so, price to earnings ratios are driven by 2 things: current earnings, but also anticipated future earnings. And so when the anticipated future earnings, the anticipation drops, the price to earnings ratios typically drop. And now you're valuing it more in terms of what are the current earnings. So,
Steve, are you able to toggle to that Morningstar report that you?
Yeah, I think I can. I can try here.
Before we talk about this.
Yeah.
Or do you want to do it at the end?
Yeah, I'll do it at the end.
Okay, so go back.
Yeah.
Go back. Yeah, that way.
Being a little difficult.
Because I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood, when you hire an advisor like us, you are hiring us, Steve. Yeah, you are hiring us specifically to manage risk. You're hiring us to keep you invested over the long run so that you can actually benefit from exposure to the market. You're not hiring us to predict what's going to happen. We do not have a crystal ball, and we know how people can get lulled into this space of feeling like they know what's going to happen and make big bets, and oftentimes get their shirt handed to them. We are not betting on horses here. And that's why, actually, if you had noticed the name of this presentation in the beginning, we said, is this the start of a bull market when you look at the S&P and where it's going in 2023, or is this a head fake? We don't know. We think that there's reason to believe that this is not where you want to be right now, invested in AI so strongly and committed to that strategy. And that's, again, because we're not doing predictions. And so the next slide actually talks a little bit about a real life example of what could occur if we were predictors. And it has this idea of, let's say that this was January 1st of 2020. Remember January 1st of 2020? None of us had any idea what was going to happen in the world. We did not know that we were all going to be locked up and sequestered in our homes, having to figure out how to shop for ourselves, how to entertain ourselves, how to work from the comfort of our beds. But what if you knew that? What if Steve and I knew that? And we said, gee, we know, we have a crystal ball and we know that that's going to happen. Should we bet on stocks that in fact would support us working from home and shopping from home and so forth. And so what we did was we pulled some stocks from January 1st of 2020 through to December 31st of 2022. So 3 years. And we looked at, first of all, the retail stocks. And we said, well, Amazon was actually down by 52.67%, whereas Walmart was up, and so was Lowe's. When we looked at dining, we saw that the DoorDash, which everybody loves, of course, was down by 72% for those 3 years, and McDonald's was up by 18.8%. When we looked at fitness, we saw Peloton was down by 93%, whereas Exponential Fitness, which is a boutique larger parent company of some of these smaller fitness places, was up by 87%. And even in terms of home entertainment versus travel, Netflix down 44%, Spotify down 67%, Hyatt Hotels up 25%. How could we have possibly projected those winners when we were looking in our crystal ball, knowing what was going to happen? And this just demonstrates that even when you think you know what's going to happen, the markets are extremely complex. And you really cannot predict exactly how that's going to play in the stocks that you're correlating it to.
And, you know, you brought up a good point earlier regarding what clients are paying. Among other things, they're paying us for our years of experience and our years that we've seen this over the years. We know we've seen this happen so many times already, but you're paying us for that. You're also paying us for our unemotional views toward the markets. We don't have emotional views. Nothing we do is based on emotions here. Nothing. It's all based on our knowledge of how things actually work in terms of the stock market.
So the fear of the recession and the debt ceiling and all that versus the greed, and that's how we position it, fear versus greed. The greed of wanting to participate in the AR market, we're trying to bring you into the center and say, no, we're not going to play those games. We're going to be even keeled, and we're going to approach investing over the long run in appropriate manner, where we're exposing you to opportunities, but we're not taking on big bets or big risk. So, and that all happens because we have a disciplined strategy. We've documented your strategy for you. If you take a look at your strategy that we gave you when you first started working with us and how you're currently invested, you'll see that what we said we were going to do for you is exactly what we're doing for you. And that's how you, in the long run, actually win, is by having a strategy and having the discipline to sticking to it.
That's right.
So if you think you're in the wrong strategy, of course, we need to talk. And if you have any questions about this particular video, we'd love to discuss it with you. And if you have any suggestions about future videos, please let us know. And if you enjoy these videos, we'd love for you to like the videos or subscribe to them. As you know, the more likes and the more subscriptions, the more the videos will be elevated, the more people will see them and will benefit from them, we hope. So please, that's what we ask of you, is just please like our videos. So thank you, and hope to talk to you soon.